All right, everybody, here we go for the 35th episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for my very special guest today, I have here the wonderful Evie from She Was Only Evie. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am so happy just to see you, but also because you just told me something really cool. We were talking about how I mentioned how the previous episode with Tiago was the 34th episode and he was 34 years old. And you informed me that
I'm 35 and this is episode 35. So
dun, dun, dun.
You're going to have to start prepping now.
Going ahead. Now I'm going to find out everybody's age before I can invite them to Dear Dr. Fantasy.
It's going to be a prerequisite.
Oh, that's funny. Well, everybody, I want to say before we get started with the discussion, Evie is just shy of 1,000 subscribers right now. So, and I usually wait to the end. I usually wait to the end of this to tell people, go subscribe to this wonderful person. But go subscribe to this wonderful person. She's just shy of 1,000 subscribers, and she's wonderful. I've had a chance before to chat with you about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and the film The Green Knight. So this is not our first time chatting with each other, but it has been a little while, right?
And Dune, it has been a while. Dune Part 2. I'm already gonna get you to promise to do a discussion on that when that comes out. So
nice. I'd love to do that. Yeah, because we did talk about Dune. Yeah. So yeah, fantastic. And I just noticed too that a lot of really cool Realm of the Elderlings content on your channel, and I'm in the midst of reading. Yeah, there are the books. Beautiful. And I'm in the midst of reading the Tawny Man trilogy. In fact, I just finished Golden Fool, the second book in that trilogy, and was blown away by just how awesome and amazing and emotional and everything that was. I mean, now it feels like, so when I read the first book in Tawny Man, Fool's Errand, I thought this is the best Robin Hobb book ever. Yeah. Now I read Golden Fool and this is the best Robin Hobb book ever, right? Does that keep happening?
Yes. So I did not expect that Assassin's Fate was going to be my favorite book. Like, I thought it was going to be Assassin's Apprentice because, there's just something about the first book in a series that it starts it all. And I was like, no, Assassin's Apprentice is going to be my favorite book. Yeah. Of the entire series. And then I kept reading and I was like, okay, these are great, these are awesome, these are Robin Hobb, they're all 5 stars. And then I got to the Fitz and the Fool trilogy and I read Fool's Assassin, and
wow, I'm like, that's the final trilogy for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah. And then I read Fool's Assassin and I'm like, oh my god, this is the best book in the series.
Wow.
And then I read Fool's Quest and I'm like, it's fine. It's probably not my most favorite of all the books. Okay. So I was like, but it's good. It's still 5 stars. It's Robin Hobb. And then I read Assassin's Fate and I'm like, what is happening? Like, this is the best book maybe on the planet. I don't know. Like,
wow.
It's so good. The way that she ends it is just it's beautiful in my opinion. So.
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, I spent a good portion of, so about 200 pages into Golden Fool, there was one particular scene, and no spoilers here, but there was one particular scene that just had me in tears. And then she just, from that point on, I was completely immersed. It was one of the most immersive reads. I didn't even feel like I was reading. I was just watching this story play out. It was like so incredibly immersive. And it just did not let me go for the last 400 pages of that book. And I just couldn't believe how it went by. And that's not always the case.
Yeah, and some would argue that, especially something like Golden Fool, and I felt that with Fool's Quest as well, admittedly, that nothing happens. Yeah. But for Golden Fool in particular, just something inexplicable about the character work that she did.
Yes.
Is just these moments just compounding upon one another, and it's just really powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing because there's not a ton of actual action, and yet there's so much tension because of all these revelations and what's going on between the various characters, and it's just so engrossing and amazing. And that even the first couple hundred pages I look back on where they were slow, but I appreciate them because what she always does is she gets me more and more invested in what's going on and in the characters and their current relationships, and just brilliant stuff. Just brilliant. So anyone out there who's ever tried a Hobb book and thought, oh, this is so slow, I don't know if I can do this. If you ever did that, like with, Assassin's Apprentice or whatever, that's what I experienced myself when I read Assassin's Apprentice. It was like, this is slow. But then she just grabs you and doesn't let go, and what she's doing during that slow part is she's creating investment. And so that's why the later parts pay off the way they do, right?
Yeah. And I will also add, don't make my mistake of reading the back of the book. Especially with Golden Fool. I read the back of the book about maybe 20 pages into it, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm looking for that thing to happen. That thing doesn't happen until doesn't even happen in the book. It's just a lead up to that thing. And I'm like, dang it. But hindsight is 2020, I suppose, but if I hadn't read the back of the book, I don't think I would have been as invested in the characters. I would have just been like, when's it gonna start? When's it gonna start? So I got the benefit of a reread without actually rereading. So in a way.
Yeah, cool. Wow. So we didn't mean to start off with a Hobb gush fest here, but why not, right?
Everything goes back to Hobb.
yeah. I mean, that's certainly music in the ears of a lot of our friends here on Booktube, like Derry, of course, is one of the biggest Hobb fans ever. But I'm in this read along right now with Mike and with Madison and Scott and Jake, and it's not a read along for them so much. It's just for me and Mike doing the Tawny Man right now. But the others are involved in these spoiler-filled discussions of each of the trilogies and the one tetralogy. I am a little nervous for, I have to admit, the Rainwild Chronicles, because that's okay. It's still Hobb, so I'm gonna be fine, I'm sure. But I have to say, I have lowered my expectations for Rainwild because do you know any Hobb fan who says Rainwild is their favorite?
I'm one of those people that I love Rainwild. It's not my favorite by far, but I actually like it more than Tawny Man.
Wow. Okay. Now that's
it's doing something different though, completely different, and kind of not necessarily lowering your expectations, but being open to just the different storytelling that Robin Hobb is utilizing. It's distinctly Robin Hobb. She reminds you, you're still reading my words. I'm still gonna destroy you in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But it's very much I don't know, it's so thematically, it makes sense. My frustrations with the first two books in the Rainwild series, I'm like, I get it. Those were all necessary to make the entire series shine, or sub-series, I should say. So I really like Rainwilds.
Okay, good. Yeah. And though there are 4 of those, they look shorter to me. Are they shorter than the other? I don't know. Am I making that up?
I mean, Dragon Keeper is probably about the size of. Yeah, I mean they're pretty much shorter. There's one Dragon Haven, I think it was. That one's almost 800 pages or something like that. That's the longest one out of the. Yeah,
okay.
that's the longest one out of the bunch. The other ones are fairly comparatively slim. So.
Okay. Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to getting there. This has been a long time coming for me. There's just so many series and things that everybody who reads around here knows this problem. And what do I get to first? And it's just, and I'm one of those who will be engaged in a lot of different series simultaneously as well. So I tend to get through them fairly slowly. But for Realm of the Elderlings, I'm reading one a month this year until I finish the entire Realm of the Elderlings. So I'm very excited for that. Yeah, and but we need to get to our standard question here on Dear Dr. Fantasy, because I'm sure there are a lot of other things that you read before becoming a Hobb fan. And so we're going to talk about that, going all the way back to little Evie, back in the day when you were a little reader. And what are some of the formative reads for you that would help explain the person you have become? In other words, you are what you read. So, Evie, do you mind sharing with us some of your important reads from your life?
Yeah, so I prepared like a nerd.
Yeah.
So I was like,
That's good.
I was going back through my life. I'm like, okay, what did I actually read? Because God knows I could barely remember what I read last year. Thank goodness for Goodreads and Google spreadsheets and reading trackers. But so I was kind of going back through my memory of like, okay, what are the books that I really remember? At least reading, if not the actual content. And I remember in elementary school, I read a lot of AV. So like True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle. That was the biggest one, I think. I read Johnny Tremaine. That's definitely not by AV, but it's by another author. It's like a historical fiction, like middle grade or whatever.
Okay.
I read Lois Lowry, The Giver, Number of the Stars. Yeah, so that's like elementary. I didn't read The Hobbit. Like, I've never read The Hobbit. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, it's The Hobbit," and I'm like, am I a fraud? Like, I've never read The Hobbit. So
I think you're okay. You're
okay. I mean,
yeah.
on the bright side, I have something to look forward to.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
but yeah, and then like in middle school, I read Dragonlance Chronicles by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman and the
Yeah.
Legends trilogy. And I read some Robin McKinley, and then I took some time off reading because I got involved with friends and social lives and stuff like that. And then in the latter half of high school, I got into classics and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
sci-fi. So I
Yeah.
read Jane Austen for the first time, Persuasion,
Yes.
my favorite novel of all
I think
time.
it's well known that you're a Jane Austen fan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
Which, by the way, I also think she's brilliant. Absolutely
yes.
brilliant. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's a reason that some of these classics have stood the test of time. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I read some Jane Austen. I
Which
read,
also, by the way, if I can interrupt you, I think
yeah,
that it makes sense in a lot of ways that you would love Hobb as well, because I actually have remarked on this in the past, particularly when I was reading Live Ship Traders, that there is something Jane Austen like about Live Ship Traders that I thought was wonderful. Do you agree with that?
yeah, I actually so I I took probably too much time going through all my Voxer messages to mostly Derry, but to various other people as I was reading the Realm of the Elderlings. And I remember sending this message. I can't remember the exact scene, but I made the comment that there was a scene in Live Ship Traders that was like a confession scene or something like that, that
Uh-huh.
it was on the level of Austen in its just the grandness and the kind of romantic with a big R
Yeah.
sense of the word. So
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, no, I totally agree. Very Austen-esque, like, and especially with Rain Wilds, like you
Yeah.
get a little bit more of the like societal like explorations of stuff. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
societal and also domestic,
yeah,
with just deep psychological insights and a fascination for relationships between people. I think they have that in common.
yeah.
I'd love to know if Robin Hobb is an Austen reader. That would be cool, right?
That would make me sad if she says I hate her. So
Yeah, yeah, me too.
like, oh, it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry for that interruption. So
Yeah, no
yeah,
worries.
we were talking about Jane Austen. Now, you didn't mention Harry Potter. Were you not a Harry Potter reader when you were a kid?
So I vividly remember my mom getting me the first two books when books 1, 2, and 3 were already out. And I remember asking my mom, why can't I get the third book? She's like, read the first two books first.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember reading them, and I didn't remember getting into Harry Potter really until probably 8th grade, ninth
Okay.
grade. So I was
Oh,
a little bit older.
yeah.
But I, along with everybody else, I was on that, going to the midnight releases of like the 6th and 7th books and stuff
Okay,
like
yeah.
that. So but I think that was a time past, and I tried rereading Harry Potter a few years ago, and I'm like, that is a time for nostalgia in my youth. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you're at the age, right, where you
yeah,
would have been the Harry Potter generation or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
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 But, okay, cool. So you've discovered Austen in late in high school, you said?
Yeah, yeah. And then along with that, I read I'm pretty sure it was an abridged version of The Count of Monte Cristo, because realizing that it's so huge, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I read an abridged version. Loved it. I should probably reread the unabridged version. But and then I read The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. And then I read the entire Dune Chronicles in high school.
Oh,
So
cool. Yeah, yeah.
did I read any of the actual required reading in my English classes? No. So
Hopefully
learn from my mistakes.
your English teachers are not watching this.
Well, I'm from the South. It wasn't the greatest of education systems anyway.
Aw.
So but no.
Cool. So by the time you were in college, then were you doing a lot of heavy reading for fun then, or were you too busy, that sort of thing? Or
again, probably shouldn't confess this, especially since you're a professor. If I wasn't interested in the books that were assigned, I did not read them. So it's terrible, I know.
So Spark Notes, that sort of thing?
Yeah, Spark Notes, and just like picking up on cues from other people talking about the books. And but I did take a major authors Jane Austen course, so obviously I read all those. And then I took a romantic poetry and prose class. That's where I got introduced to Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights. And
oh, I love Wuthering Heights. Yeah.
Another one of my favorite books of all time. And then also Frankenstein. That rounds up my holy trinity of 19th century British female authors.
Yeah. Have you read George Eliot yet? Middlemarch and all that?
I tried reading Middlemarch, and I'm like,
oh, okay. Wasn't for you?
Not for me. So okay. I've come to the acceptance and conclusion, or I've come to accept that more Victorian literature is probably not my jam.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, more in the Romantic era with Austen, and yeah.
Because I did read North and South, and I'm like,
Elizabeth Gaskell. Yeah,
it's fine. Like, you know, but I'm like,
I like North and South too. Yeah.
Like, I appreciate it, but it's not like, you know, Persuasion for me or something like that. Where I'm like, this is amazing, I want to read it all the time. So
yeah, I think North and South is one of the best books for understanding class in the 19th century.
Oh yeah,
it's really an important book in that sense. I think I would put it right up with Dickens, you know, who wrote a lot like in Hard Times and other writing about this class stuff going on, and the degradation of human life in the factories and all of that as industrialization, you know, sunk its claws into the populace and all of that. So that it's really good stuff, I think. But not probably the same kind of, I guess, more emphasis on the domestic and that sort of thing that you'd find in Jane Austen, perhaps. Yeah. So you like the slightly earlier stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Neat. All right. So that is all very exciting. And any other important big reads that you haven't had a chance to discuss yet that you would consider to be at the heart or in the center of your soul?
Yeah, I mean, from my previous Booktube time, I can't really think of anything. I did a lot of, much like probably a lot of people on Booktube, I just did a lot of rereading and reading of my favorite books over and over again. I really didn't expand on anything. And I didn't read a lot of fantasy. I didn't really read any fantasy other than Dragonlance until Booktube. So
yeah. So Booktube, then why just to go back to you starting your channel and everything, what made you want to dive in and start a channel? Was it partly the desire to expand and to expose yourself to more different reads, or why, or was it even a conscious thing, or what made you do it?
So technically my first video is like it's a joke. It's a
Oh.
tier ranking of Emily Bronte's novels, which obviously it's only one. So, you know,
Well,
it's
very
like
nice.
6
That's funny.
seconds long or something like that. So I just did it as like, because I thought it was funny, because I
That
have
is funny.
humor. Yeah, thank you. Okay, good. It's not just me then.
I like it. I like
yeah.
it. Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? I've been watching Booktube for a while. Let me try out like these TBRs and wrap-ups and stuff like that. And that was in 2020, so right before the pandemic hit.
So your class of 2020?
Yeah. And I did it for a while. I did like the wrap-ups, the TBRs, I did tag videos and stuff like that. And I'm just an anxious person. So it started to really wear on me of having to sit in front of a camera, feel like I'm staring at myself and talking to the void, to no one. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna not do that. Like actually the discussions that we did with the Green Knight and stuff like that, that's when I was like, I like this. I like this type of stuff. I like the discussions.
Yeah.
So, you know, I tried doing the normal Booktube stuff for a little bit longer, but I was like, screw it. Like, I got to do what makes me happy.
Yep.
It's like, if it's not fun for me, what's the point? So I pretty much, with the exception of a few here and there, I pretty much entirely do discussion videos. So.
You know what? I like that. I think I most certainly prefer discussions. This is why I'm here. I love being with people. I love learning from people. There's something dynamic and magical about discussions and how people can spark ideas in others in the midst of a discussion, and they can go in places you never know. That's part of the fun, I think. I'm not a very spontaneous person in general, but I do like the spontaneity of discussions versus the artificiality of the videos that I make. Like I like doing reviews and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. I don't dislike it, but they're artificial. And like you said, you're staring into a camera and you're pretending to engage with people. You're imagining somebody later on who's going to be watching this, and you're trying to engage and, you know, look in the camera and all that. But there's something, it's harder to do, I think, to do, for me anyway, the lone video, and not as much fun as what we're doing now. And so, you know, I'm never going to be the one who tells anyone what they should or shouldn't do. I think it's wonderful that we have lots of different things we can do on YouTube and Booktube, and I see a lot of people. YouTube seems to be pushing shorts in this kind of attempt to imitate TikTok, I guess, is what it is. But my daughter was funny. She said something to the degree that, YouTube shorts are just recycled TikTok videos from 2 years ago or something like that. I was like, oh, okay. But anyway, that seems to be the stampede is toward shorter and shorter content, and of course more general, like top 10 this and, you know, book haul that, and where you have lots of different books but you don't talk about them in depth. I do exactly the opposite of what YouTube wants us to do right now. So I have long
through the algorithm.
Yes, forget
it to the man.
I do these long videos, and a lot of them are just like in-depth discussions on a particular book or series. And I do reviews. I do dedicated reviews, which seems to be like a rare thing these days, you know. So, but I'm totally with you though when you say I just do what I'm passionate about. I do what I want. This is why I'm here. I'm here for the people. I'm here to discuss, right?
Yeah, and I think for me, or one aspect for me, is with like kind of sit down, looking at the camera, just me type videos, is I wouldn't say that I'm like a perfectionist, but at the same time, like I have it in my brain, like I have to say the right words in the way that I want to say them. Like I'm a perfectionist in that way. So I'm like, I stumble over my words, and takes me 40 minutes to film a 10-minute video or something like that. Whereas with these types of discussions, I'm like, if I say something stupid, oh well. So, you know, if I stumble over my words, there you go.
Yeah, I think we're more forgiving of ourselves when we're in a discussion
Mhm.
than when we're trying to make this perfect. And my first video, in all of its glorious awkwardness, has a bajillion cuts, because I thought I had to be totally, if you just listen to it and you don't watch it, it's much better, I think.
Yeah.
But it's just like cut, 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 because I thought I couldn't have any pauses, or I could say which we all do and naturally, and or so, or but, or whatever,
Whatever our crutch word
fillers.
is.
Yeah. So I do think it's you feel much more pressure, I think, with the lone video, where you're supposed to be so articulate and smooth and engaging and exciting and all of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, God bless the ones that do that. It just doesn't come naturally to me. And even for the folks that do it where it doesn't come naturally to them, they obviously put in the effort, and I'm just like, I'm lazy, man. Like, I don't want to put in more effort than I really need to. So
Yeah. That's for sure. There are people who I recently had the wonderful opportunity to talk to Jay from Captured in Words, and I don't know how much time he puts into his videos, but the production value on his videos is just
yeah.
wow. I mean, he has all these effects and everything, and that's something that I'll probably never do, because one, I'm a dinosaur, but two, I can see how much time that must take
Right. Yeah.
to produce one of those videos. I'm sure it takes a lot of time, even though I'm sure for him it's like, bang, bang, bang,
Like,
knows how to
yeah.
do it.
It's muscle memory at this point. So
Probably, yeah. I mean, I can see where you do something, you get better at. Like, I started out with the worst thumbnails on Booktube, boring, just a little picture with poorly integrated text or something, and that's all I knew how to do. And then I realized, I can make these more fun, and so I employed my daughter to make thumbnails for me for a while, and then I think she sort of got bored doing it and taught me how to do it. So now I make my thumbnails, and I think they're much better than the old ones, right?
yeah, no, I like them. I mean, there's a reason I pay for Canva. It's the ease of use. Like, it's like, oh, I want to pick up, I want to like isolate this one thing. Okay,
Yeah.
it's gonna do it for me automatically. It's smart enough to do it. I don't have to learn about like going down to pixel level of deleting stuff or
Yeah. I only have a couple free apps that I use. So I'm a cheapskate. So I use a couple free apps. One is Eraser, which is what allows me to take that picture of you and erase the background and stick your head and put it on whoever. But then I have to do that. So Eraser gives me the image, and then I have to do it in another app called Fonto, which you can I think you can buy a version of it, but I have just the free version of Fonto as well. So that's what I use to make thumbnails. But
yeah, so I normally only use the free version of Canva, and then for anyone that doesn't know, if you like the Allen gifs, that's me.
yeah.
I create the Allen gifs. So the system that I used previously, for whatever reason, it just completely like blew up. I don't know what happened to it. It was just a web app or whatever.
Oh,
So I switched to Canva for creating gifs. So I was like, well, I feel like I kind of need to pay for Canva to get like the full breadth of what they can do. So it's a good investment, I think.
wow. So you are the creator of the Allen gifs. I love this fact.
Yeah.
And people would find them mostly in his Discord, or is that's where they're used? Okay.
Yeah, mostly in the Discord. Apparently there are some like on Tenor. It's a GIF like site or something like that.
Okay. I don't know what that is. Yeah. All right.
And so my other half, I call him my other half. Well, I'm just now called him my other half, but Kai, he created the Allen bot. So he uses the
Allen
GIFs
bot.
he uses the GIFs that I make, puts them in the bot, And so you can just like do a command and be like, oh, I'm gonna have a random Alan GIF come up or a particular one. So
Oh, this is wonderful. There's a whole
it's a
world of
tag team
Alan
effort.
gifs to explore. This is wonderful. Okay, see, I'm missing out on by being a stick in the mud when it comes to Discord and stuff. But yeah, so I'm assuming there must be a Boosh GIF.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Probably several Boosh GIFs, I guess.
There is one Boosh gift, and then there is one fake Boosh gift. So
Okay.
gift. There you go.
Fake Boosh. What's a fake Boosh?
It literally, he just says it, fake Boosh. Like, it's whatever Alan says in his videos that are hysterical. Like, Tiago actually sent me a message the other day. He's like, request, here's the timestamps. I'm like, all right, I guess I know what I'm doing this weekend. So
Oh my goodness. How long does it take to make a GIF?
It's now to the point of I just have to download the video that Alan had created or posted on YouTube, and then I just have to clip out the portions. And since a lot of folks give me the timestamps, I just have to clip out those little bits and then put them into Canva, put text on it, and then
Okay.
done.
All right. So what we need then is a video top 10 Alan GIFs, I think, right?
That would be amazing, because there are 650 Alan GIFs.
Whoa.
There's a lot. Yeah.
Wait, so this could be a whole thing where you do a poll.
Yeah.
And you have like maybe a tournament, even like this Alan GIF versus that Alan GIF.
Yeah.
Narrow down to
bracket.
the top.
Yes.
Yeah. Have people
You're giving me ideas now. Okay.
They're good.
It's gonna happen.
I'm on board. It's all yours, Evie. Since I think you should do the video since you created the GIFs. So yeah. That'll be the Alan GIF tournament or something.
That would be hysterical. Or make Alan kind of choose the winners of all of his own GIFs.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun. But yeah, you'll have to do something, I think, along those lines, right? Yeah. However you decide to do it, I'm on board. I would love to watch that because I'm not involved in the Discord stuff, so I don't get to see these GIFs on a daily basis. So for those of us who are, in the cold, this would be nice. We would, and I'm sure everybody on his Discord would have fun if they got to vote or something too. Yeah. So, yeah, there we go. Everyone look forward to the top 10 Alan or the Alan GIF tournament. Is there anyone else who's GIFable though, who you like to make GIFs of, but besides Alan?
There has been a request for a GIF of you, Philip.
Oh.
So there is a GIF that exists of like your laugh or whatever. I guess Jake finds it hysterical. Like, I don't know. I think you were laughing at something reacting to Alan or something. I don't know what it was. He just sent me the file or sent me the video and the timestamp. I'm like, all right, you requested it. Here you go.
There is a Dr. Fantasy GIF out there.
There is. There are you related GIFs of like Alan saying that you're gonna come in with your tennis racket and hit people over the head. So I'll definitely send those to you. There's a few of like Sarah from Sarah Reads, Jimmy from the Fantasy Network.
Awesome. Sarah would be awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
She would be GIFable because she has some great one-liners,
Oh yeah.
And Jimmy, of course. Yeah. All right. Well,
yeah,
good.
those are the main ones. So
those are the people who get gift a lot, I guess. Is that what you'd say? Gift? Yeah.
Sure. I guess. I don't know the phrasing anymore. I feel like it changes. Is it GIF? Is it GIF?
Oh no, let's not get into that debate. Yeah, because it's obviously GIF, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, well, that's awesome. So what are you reading right now? You're finished with Realm of the Elderlings? So what? Yeah, that must be first of all, you must be in like a sort of postpartum kind of phase with that. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I genuinely felt like I was going through a grieving process. Not because of like, well, I guess kind of things that happened, but just that it was over, and I was just like, I don't know what to do with my life anymore. It's 16 books that I invested my life and my life, a little over a year. It's not not long of a period, but you just get so invested in all these characters, and it's like,
now
it's over. What what do I do next?
Yeah.
But thankfully, what I've always done, because I never, well, I normally wouldn't read a Hobb book back to back. I would do like a book in between.
Yeah.
And I would always read something by an author that I knew, because I know, okay, I know this author, and I know that I'll enjoy it. So it's not going to get the critique of not being a Robin Hobb book if it was a brand new author that I'd never read before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's the risk of yeah, the poor authors that you follow after reading Robin Hobb. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit unfair. So I was like, I'll read an author that I know of, that I enjoy. So after I finished Realm of the Elderlings, what did I read? I just read a lot of standalones. I did start, most recently I finished The Grace of Kings, so I think that's gonna be my next series that I focus on.
It's a Dandelion Dynasty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with Tim Liu. And his short story collections are fantastic. If you haven't read them yet. So
I need to jump on board that series. There are 4 books in it, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Technically 3, but like the 3rd and 4th books are like we're split because they're just so huge.
Oh, he pulled a Tad Williams. He pulled a Tad Williams. Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah.
But right now I'm in the midst of reading an e-arc of Under My Skin, which is a short story collection by KJ Parker.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Comes out in March, I think. So I'm slowly working my way through that, and I'm actually reading Piers Plowman by William Langland.
Yeah, wow. It's your 14th century. Yeah.
It's surprisingly, at least this translation is surprisingly readable.
Really, yeah, it's pretty trippy stuff. It's really trippy.
Yeah, so actually the only pretty much the only reason that I even wanted to read this is this is my platform to sing the praises of Sarah Tolmie. So Sarah Tolmie wrote a book called The Stone Boatman, and apparently she does teach literature at a University of Waterloo in Canada, I think.
Okay.
And she put in her acknowledgements that she was directly inspired by
Piers Plowman.
And I was like, all right, I really like The Stone Boatman. Fantastic novel. It's one of my top 9 novels of last year.
Wow.
If you limit it to like 1 book per author and stuff like that. And it's just fantastic. So I was like, I want to read the inspiration and see like where it comes into play. And so far I'm really enjoying it. So
wow, good. Yeah, I mean, it's a text I'm very familiar with as a medievalist. One of the most important, books of the 14th century, along with Canterbury Tales and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And it is very allegorical, extremely allegorical. It is really, if you want to know what allegory is, read Piers Plowman. This is straight up allegory, where you have characters like Faith, and embodied in a form, a human form, and that sort of thing. But it's also very, very just weird. It's really weird. Yeah.
I mean, can you really spoil a 14th century work?
I don't think so. It's more than 600 years old. I think it's fair game to spoil at this point. But...
I mean, I'm only 2 passages in. So
you can't spoil much anyway.
Yeah, it's true. So I just finished the part where Fable / Lying is trying to marry Mead, and the king gets in the way, like, how dare you, and everyone just scatters and Mead gets captured. So I'm going to continue that after our discussions, so see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it is very much Langland was a priest in the 14th century, and he was writing about corruption in the church, and there was a time, this is pre-Reformation, of course, but there were people going around pointing out the corruption within the church, including Chaucer in Canterbury Tales. It's very much, in some ways, an indictment of official organized religion, which was doing a disservice to the actual faith, because it is a very devout book. It is very much about, in some ways, a quest for faith. even in the midst of a time when the official religion was falling short because of corruption, because of becoming part of the apparatus of the state. You know, it's kind of interesting because you do have various figures in the 14th century who seem to be articulating something very like what would be the Reformation much later, you know. More than 100 years later, we have to wait for the actual Reformation, but there were people, you know, who were
it didn't just Reformation didn't just pop up out of nowhere.
exactly
had to start somewhere. So
exactly, so you had people like Wycliffe, who wanted to translate the Bible and into the vernacular, which was forbidden. You know, the church said no, it has to be in Latin, because they maintain control of the sacred text that way, right? If most people can't read it, they get to say what it is, right? So, but yeah, it's a very dreamlike and very trippy kind of read, I think. So
I sometimes, I mean, it's there. I do have to like. I started actually taking notes, just so that I can like put on paper like, what do I actually read? Okay, this is what I actually read, so I can just wrap my head around it. Because otherwise, I'm like, what just happened? So it's definitely trippy.
Yeah, we don't have that same. So allegory it's interesting because it is a kind of a transitional phase of literacy in a way. So you have an oral formulaic culture where stories are told verbally, and they lean on, you know, you have a certain bard or whatever, and you lean on formulas and stories that everybody knows and that sort of thing. Allegory seems to be a product of a sort of a middle phase of literacy. We're not allegorical readers much anymore. Allegory is not really a thing that you find all that often in modern writing, really. But it was very popular during that time, a certain kind of mindset. And you see it a little bit later, like in Pilgrim's Progress by Bunyan. So, you know, as late as that, there's some pretty prominent allegories. But in the modern era, I don't think most people really dig allegory that much, right?
Yeah, I think at least the one that comes to my mind as allegorical is Chronicles of Narnia, but that still is very much plot-driven fantasy. It's not like a direct allegory of you have hope, you have faith, you have whatever.
You're right. Like Aslan is Jesus, you know, and that is somewhat allegorical, and that's the difference, I think, between allegory and, say, something like metaphor or symbolism, where allegory is like one-for-one correspondence. This character named Faith is Faith, right? And so there's a kind of, I think, a tendency there's a rigidity to that, I think, that doesn't allow as much room for interpretation, where a symbol could be suggestive of many different possible interpretations, right?
Yeah.
So I think that may be one reason why allegory feels, for many times, it's not as interesting. It's kind of boring in a way, because you're told this is what it is, and so you're okay, you know, and that's it. That's the end of that discussion. Whereas with a skillfully used symbol, it's suggestive, and it can be
nebulous and dependent upon who's reading or listening to it, what they bring to it.
Exactly.
But I think even with allegory like this, there's still, you know, room for discussion with the text. That's what I like to call it. So because even if someone's beating you over the head about something, you can be like, well, why do they think like that? What is my response to what they are saying? And kind of, I don't know, taking that into account and forming your own opinions about stuff.
Maybe there'll be some defender of allegory out there listening to this who will have something to say about allegory, but it's still a really, I think, interesting text. Not my favorite thing from the 14th century, to be honest. I don't like it as much as I love Sir Gawain and the Green Knight or Canterbury Tales. But it is an important text, I think, for its historical value, but also it's weird.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, it's
yeah.
I imagine that there were a lot more works that we don't have, that we don't know about today.
Oh, sure.
So that this has been able to survive for 600 years is there's obviously a reason for that. Some
Yeah.
people, multiple people, had to have connected it with it enough to
Oh, yeah.
want to keep its longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't looked at it in a while, so I don't remember how many manuscripts there are of Piers Plowman, but probably
Or three.
three. Okay.
Actually 3 or 4. Because so the funny thing is I had went to order this and I was like, oh, Piers Plowman. Oh, there's multiple texts. So A, B, C, and I think it's 3, A, B,
Yep.
C, A, B, and
Yep.
C text. And I'm thinking, oh, it's just gonna be little things. I get the delivery and there's these massive books, and I'm like, what is this? So I was like, I need to get a different version. So I found this translation, and I'm glad I found this translation because it's so readable. And it has the original Middle English.
Middle English. Yeah.
On the opposite side.
Oh,
So
I
it's,
like that. Yeah.
yeah, so it's really interesting. I'm like, oh, it's almost readable for me as someone who doesn't know anything about Middle English. It's surprisingly you can see those correlations in like to
Yeah.
modern English.
Yeah, it's not as easy to read as Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It's in a dialect that is a little less related to modern English than Chaucer's dialect, which was more the area around London was Chaucer's dialect, and it had
But
a
it
bigger
seems to be
influence.
it seems to be much an in between of Chaucer and the Gawain poet. The
Yeah.
Gawain poet, like trying to read that, I'm like, that's a completely foreign language. So
Yeah, if you were to try to read Sir Gawain, they're all from the same century, but the dialects were much more different back then. And so, yeah, the dialect of Sir Gawain the Green Knight from more northern western part of England is very different from what we would, from Chaucer's even Middle English, and is much harder. I think you'd have to be trained to read Sir Gawain in the Green Knight in the original. Whereas Canterbury Tales, if you were determined, and you had a nice glossary or the difficult words explained right in the footnotes or something, you could be reading it in Middle English comfortably in a few weeks. So yeah, but it's fun stuff. I'm really thrilled that you're reading these 14th century things here.
yeah, I tried reading the Tale of Genji, an ancient Japanese classic from I think the first millennium. I think about 900 to 1000.
Oh wow, cool.
I got about like a third in, and I was like, this is great, but it's not for me. And I wound up giving it to Tori from Tori Talks because I know that she's into like Japanese literature and stuff like that. So I was like,
oh, cool.
Go for it. And samurai, and specifically that period. So
yeah,
I have interest. I just have to pick up the right thing at the right time. So
yeah, speaking of, well, it's not as old as that, but I'm reading Vagabond right now, the manga, which is based on I want to say early 17th, maybe late 16th century figure. And there's samurai and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm just, getting into that a little bit myself. So that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally shifting gears. It's to focus on the Japanese literature. Natsumi Soseki. I got into reading Natsumi Soseki a couple of years ago. I read Kokoro. Fantastic. It was turn of the 20th century is when he was publishing.
Okay.
And he's really exploring the kind of the generational difference of old Japan and this Japan opening it up to the world, literally.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And it's really, really interesting. So I really enjoyed Kokoro, and then I read oh gosh, The Miner, that's what it was. And speaking of allegory, like that's definitely like metaphor, allegory. And it's just a young man, he's going to commit suicide, but he winds up going to a mine and working in a mine. And it's just it's one of those books, at least for me, that really benefited from discussion. I was buddy reading it with someone, and it's just another one that was in my top 9 of last year. It's surprise, it just came out of nowhere. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. And it's just
Those
really
are great. Those are wonderful
yeah.
when that happens, right?
And I mean, it goes to show that buddy reading and discussing it with people really, it just elevates a reading experience, because the majority of my top books of the year have been buddy reads or discussions that I've had with people. So
Yep.
yeah.
So true. I mean, first of all, there are some books that I've read as buddy reads around here that I wouldn't have picked up on my own.
Yeah.
And so I'm exposed to new things that way. This is one of the best things about this. And then, as you said, being in the discussion with your friends just opens these books up, these stories up in ways you never could have on your own. And that is such an enriching experience as well. That's why we're here, that's why we're here. Fantastic. So it sounds like after reading Realm of the Elderlings, you needed a kind of let me read some standalones, some, some things that don't require more than a year to finish.
Yeah.
Is there a next big thing though on the horizon you think you might want to try?
Other than the Dandelion Dynasty, I am pretty much determined to read the Gormenghast trilogy this year.
Interesting.
It is Titus Groan has been my white whale of a book. I have tried reading it so many times, and it's one of those books, at least for the prose for me. I need so much concentration, and life gets in the way, and so I'm able to get a chapter in, life gets in the way, and then by the time I can go back to it, I have to reread that chapter, and I get a little bit further and a little bit further every single time before life gets in the way and I stop. I've been trying to read it for almost 10 years, so it's been forever. But I'm determined this year I'm going to read the Gormenghast trilogy, not just Titus Groan, the entire trilogy. So
all right. Yeah.
I know Amanda from Shelf Unstable, she's like, I've read Titus Groan and I need to continue on. I will do a reread with you. I'm like, yes, okay, this will be also incentive. So
that'll be encouragement, I'm sure. Yeah, cool. Wow. Yeah, I'm reading something right now, The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, and I'm just reading the first book in it at the moment, The Shadow of the Torturer.
I've heard that it is, you need extra materials to explain what is going on in the book.
I mean, that's what you hear. It's not that reading it is difficult. I mean, what I've found so far is that the prose is actually pretty accessible. It's nothing super fancy or difficult. But what he does is, so far, he's throwing in all these weird made up words that are like just in the middle, like sometimes like 2 and 3 a page. And it's like, I don't know what that is.
And he doesn't give you like context clues.
No.
It's just like, boom.
It's just there. It's like this. It's like, okay, clearly I'm in a different time or place here. And I mean, I think I know what he's doing, but so many people have said you don't get this on your first read through. You have to read it twice really to have a clue what's going on. So I'm saying, like, I'm actually kind of like, should I be concerned that I'm not that confused yet? Because other than the fact that he throws in these just random made up words, which are actually kind of alienating in a way, he must have been very aware that putting in these words,
very intentional. Yeah.
I mean, it's just alienating. I don't know what that is. I have no way of knowing what that is, and so I'm just gonna keep reading, and maybe I'll find out what it is, maybe I won't, so but that's how it is for me so far. I'm not that far into Shadow of the Torturer yet, but so far, but it's like, Huh.
Yeah.
I have to say, like we said before, it's not quite fair reading anything after a Robin Hobb book. So I picked it up right after this incredibly emotionally investing kind of read in Golden Fool. And then I get to this very kind of deliberately alienating kind of thing. So it's so far, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, that kind of thing.
It takes an adjustment period. So
Yeah. So I went from an author who's deliberately trying to grab me and put me in there to an author who's kind of pushing me away a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm curious though, because I think that pushing away is going to motivate me to try to figure out, okay, what actually is he doing here? And so far, interesting character. It's a first person narration.
I was gonna ask what point of view it's
Yeah. So like Golden Fool, we have a first person, narrator, the main character. And I don't know much about this character yet, but I have a feeling that, and the thing that it's famous for, other than being something you have to read more than once to get, is the unreliability of the narrator. So I'm approaching this narrator like, should I be skeptical here?
yeah.
So, but yeah, we'll see how I like it. It is praised by people as one of the most brilliant series in speculative fiction. And I do say speculative fiction because I think that there are parts of it that can feel a bit like fantasy, but I think it's really more science fiction, kind of dystopian future science fiction sort of thing. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, I've another thing that I've kind of, as I've read more, I've come to realize about myself is, at least in fantasy, because I'm so relatively new to it, the more that I've read, the more that I've realized I like more of the genre blending of fantasy, not necessarily like sci-fi fantasy, although those are always nice, but more, and I don't even want to say literary fantasy, but more of the softer side of genre fiction.
So Dune being a great example.
Yeah, and also this is really just an excuse for me to talk about Simon Jimenez. Nice. So The Vanished Birds and Spear Cuts Through Water, which was my favorite book of last year.
Yeah.
Even above all the Robin Hobb. What he does with science fiction and fantasy respectively is, it's less about the fantastic or the technological, and it's really, the focus is back on the story itself. And with that said, I'm sure hard sci-fis and epic fantasies or whatever, they do have stories, they focus on the stories and there's plot and stuff like that, but just the way that it's portrayed, how he portrays it in other stories like Sarah Told Me, the fantasy that she writes, it just clicks with my brain, because it's less about the magic system or something like that, than anything else.
Yeah, I think Joanna's been talking about that author as well, right? The Simon Jimenez. Yeah.
I got her to read The Vanished Birds, and I'm like, yes, and she loved it. So
cool. Wow. Yeah, that I hear you. I think that I have read some more like just hard sci-fi, but I find myself naturally attracted to the sci fantasy, or whatever you want to call it. These labels are very limited in their usefulness, but things like Dune and Star Wars, which are kind of like really fantasy plots dressed up with science fiction elements. I think that's at least how I feel about them. And books like, N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy, right? Which is arguably science fiction, but also there's magic in there. There's a point where it's just magic, and so is it fantasy then? And ultimately, another favorite author of mine, Mark Lawrence, blends a lot of fantasy and science fiction. You don't always see the science fiction coming until later in Lawrence's books. I don't know if you've read any Lawrence or not, Okay, you probably would
I've
enjoy.
I've been debating on where to start. Like I've heard Book of the Ancestors is like one of the best ones, best series, but I don't know. Do you have to like read the other series first,
No, you
or
don't. Yeah. So
okay?
if I were to give you a recommendation on where to start, I think Book of the Ancestor would be a great starting point for you for Mark Lawrence's books. I don't know how much you love grimdark, but his first, probably most famous, I don't know. Book of the Ancestor is pretty well known now too, but the Broken Empire trilogy, which starts with Prince of Thorns, that is actual grimdark, right? And in that same world, you have the Red Queen's War trilogy, which is not grimdark. There's a different narrator. Both are first-person narration, and the narrator of the Broken Empire trilogy, Jorg, is a villain, a despicable, terrible human being, and does awful things and tells you about them. So I love that trilogy. So you find out more about Jorg as it goes on. But the second trilogy, Red Queen's War, in the same world, but a different first-person narrator. There are some cameos, and some crossover between these two. They happen concurrently.
Okay.
The two book ones are almost like next to each other, and the two book twos and the book threes are next to each other.
I think I remember you talking about in your week that was last week or the week before. You were talking about like how there's overlap, and I guess Book of the Ancestor, or Book of the Ancestor, maybe this newest series, I can't remember.
Different.
You can see the implications or whatever of the wider universe.
Yeah, there are threads that connect all of the Mark Lawrence trilogies, but frankly, I think a lot of people who aren't necessarily grimdark readers would be better starting with Book of the Ancestor, with Red Sister. Yeah. I think you would enjoy it, actually. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I thought it was a beautiful trilogy. I really did. And I'm really looking forward to Book of the Ice, which is the other trilogy he's written in that world, which is more recently written. So
that's probably the one I was thinking of then.
Possibly. Yeah, I haven't read the Book of the Ice yet. It's something I'm very excited to read. He's also got the Impossible Times trilogy, which is more science fiction.
Oh, cool.
And he's got this new thing coming out, The Book That Wouldn't Burn, and I think that's probably going to be part of a series.
I think I saw an arc or something like that. I saw it somewhere. It was probably on like a pre-order page, like advertising, or
pretty recently he did a cover reveal for it, I think. Yeah.
That's probably it then.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say my recommendation for you, Evie, is start with Book of the Ancestor, with Red Sister. Yeah. If you're looking for something.
Yeah. I will add that to my never-ending TBR.
Oh my goodness, yeah, my poor TBR. I don't even know what to call it anymore. It's infinite.
It's a mountain of books at this point. So
yeah, and which is a great thing. I'll never run out of books that I want to read. So that's a good problem. But I feel guilty about the books that I'm not reading, even while I'm enjoying the books that I am reading. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get it. But I mean, at the same time, like, I'm a big rereader. Like, there's just something comforting in rereading a favorite book.
Yeah.
And then also, on top of that, seeing something new in a favorite book, whenever you read it, because circumstances change. You get a little bit older, and so I hear a lot of people are like feel bad for rereading because they're like, oh, there's so many other books to read. It's like, sometimes you need a comfort read. Like, sometimes your brain just kind of needs to know what's going to happen and just have that kind of freedom in a way, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, you know what? I have to say, you just made me realize that becoming involved in Booktube has actually pretty much almost entirely eliminated rereads from my life. Which is sad in a way. I used to reread Lord of the Rings every year at one point in my life, and I had stopped doing that every year before Booktube. But I reread the First Law trilogy. I reread the A Song of Ice and Fire before starting Booktube. But since starting Booktube, I have not reread anything except for the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which I read before, and I needed to reread it. I wanted to reread it to get more out of it, and that worked out really well. But that's I don't think I've reread anything, unless you count work related reading, because I teach, stories that I reread all the time. But I don't think I've reread anything since starting BookTube, because I'm always trying to get to new stuff. So that's the nature, I guess, of the beast, isn't it?
I mean, maybe now that I think about it, that was probably a contributing factor to me to like being like, all right, I'm going to take a step back and just do what makes me happy with, BookTube related stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was reading a lot of, I was just trying to keep up with everybody.
Yeah.
Not just from a quantity wise, but like, I want to be reading what everybody else is reading.
Yeah.
And I was like, again, I need to make myself happy. Like, this is a hobby for everyone. I don't want to hate reading now that I've finally gotten back into it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I pretty much try to at least have one reread on my TBR a month. So like as of like this month,
Wow.
I've been working on my third reread of the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden. So I did Bear and the Nightingale last month. I'm doing The Girl in the Tower this month, and then The Winter of the Witch next month, and then I'm going to be rereading the Books of Babel, which I know. Have you started Similar to Sins yet?
I haven't started yet. I'm reading,
Okay.
like I said, I'm reading actually the Shadow of the Torturer, and then, well, I'm going to read the next two Vagabond books, but that'll take me a day or two.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were like a concurrent reader, if you just did one at a time.
Yeah, no, I'm really bad at reading more than one book at a time. So yeah, I like to start and finish a book before picking up another book. I've been forced to do concurrent reads a couple times here on BookTube, and it's not my natural inclination, I'll put it that way. But I skip around series though. Like I'll read a Dresden Files book, and then I'll read Shadow of the Torturer, and then I'll read Hobb, and then I'll read, I move around the different series. But
I can't do multiple series going at the same time. Like that's why I focused on Hobb so much, and now I'm doing Dandelion Dynasty, and then I'll be doing Gormenghast trilogy. But that's the thing that I love about short stories is I can do a short story and then I can read something else, and then read another short story, read something else. And I think with Pierce Plowman, because it's poetry, like that's its own thing. So I'm like, all right, I can have something else going at the same time. So what was I saying? But yeah, so I do at least one reread a month, and
that's great.
And if my mind is saying I want another reread, I really want to have another comfort read, I'll add another one. So
good for you. I think that's really smart, actually, because BookTube burnout is a thing, right? And we've seen people who have gotten overwhelmed, and if you're losing the passion and the joy because you're trying to get to a certain goal, or you're trying to get X number of subscribers, or whatever it might be, or you're trying to just keep up with the Joneses, on BookTube, it can suck all the joy out of it. And we're here for the love of all of this, aren't we?
Yeah. And you were mentioning at the very start of like that I'm super close to 1,000, which is always exciting. Thank you, I appreciate that. At the same time, I'm like, it's just a number.
It's
like
a number.
And as much as I try to not look at it and try to not focus on it, because it really doesn't mean anything. Again, it's these conversations, these discussions that are really the that light the fire and get me really excited just about reading and just talking with people. So
you're so smart that way, I think. And I think anyone who has a channel can relate to the idea that it's easy to get hung up on the numbers. I mean, we have this whole like YouTube studio thing that tells us every day
and stuff like that, and
you gained or lost this many subscribers, this video has this many views, and it's your 7th worst video of the month, or whatever, and it's like
and So a few weeks ago, I got an email after I had posted a video.
Huh.
I got an email from YouTube saying, "Oh, this video isn't performing nearly as well. What could you do?" I'm like, I don't care. Like, delete, block. How do I turn this off, this notification? Like, I mean, unfortunately, YouTube kind of tries to push that and tries to reinforce like unhealthy, at least for me, it is unhealthy mindsets when it comes to content creation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, no, I
it's
hear
hard.
you.
It's hard to push back on that. So,
It
not to say
really
that I'm
is.
like better than anyone else or whatever. Like, oh, I don't pay attention. It's like it's hard. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I know there are people who pay close attention to the numbers and it's fun for them. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. I don't think it has to be, but I'm more like you. I think that the more I focus on the numbers and the performance of an individual video, I think it would be depressing and I wouldn't enjoy this. So, and if I really paid attention to that stuff, I wouldn't do long form discussions. I wouldn't do, dedicated reviews. I wouldn't do the stuff that I know won't perform as well.
Right.
But I do them because that's why I'm here. I'm not gonna, why would I go do something else that I don't enjoy, even if it gets me better numbers, That's how I feel anyway. So I keep doing the discussions and reviews that I enjoy. And there's an audience. There's definitely an audience for that too.
Oh yeah.
I don't feel like YouTube is pushing that sort of content as much. I don't know how. I have no idea. I shouldn't even claim to have any vague understanding of the algorithm and what random gods and goddesses run that thing. But
I think at least on our corner of BookTube, again, I can only speak for myself and what I perceive. Our little corner of BookTube, we there just seems to be a genuine, like, how do I say it? There's a genuine interest in the people, not the channel. So taking your Dear Dr. Fantasy stuff, like, even though it's not pushed out on the algorithm, we're gonna watch them because we enjoy watching these discussions and watching your reviews and stuff like that. And there's a, I don't want to say loyalty because that sounds weird, but there's just our corner of BookTube, I feel like we can understand, like, we can see the intentionality behind people.
It's a community. It's a
community.
Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah, which is beautiful. I think that it's so cool. It's like we have this international, it's not even a classroom, because classroom implies that we're forced to do it, right? Or there's something dry about it. I don't know what to call it, but it's like we're all sitting around a metaphorical campfire together and bonding over these stories. And it's just wonderful, really.
It's great.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It really is. And I'm someone who, like many people out there, before they discovered this platform, probably didn't know a lot of people in their personal lives who they could talk to about these reads. So it's kind of it's a great discovery. It happened for me later in life, but it's a great discovery to find that there are people who are as passionate, and in some cases more passionate even than I am, about a particular series, and they're looking for someone to talk about with these books.
And I mean, also, like, creating a passion. Like, again, I didn't really read a lot of fantasy, and now I am a Hobb acolyte. So it's this community is just so great. I obviously no community is perfect. We got some people can be jerks. Not gonna name names. Alan.
Oh, no.
Love you, Alan. Obviously that's totally a joke. But
he should be able to take a joke. I think they spent some time on Chatting with Nuts last night.
Oh yeah. If you can't take it, don't dish it out. I'm just saying.
Right. Yeah.
But no, all joking aside, this is a great community, and I I was admittedly surprised when you're like, hey, do you want to join Dear Dr. Fantasy? When I was like, hey, you should add this person to your consideration list. I'm like, wait, what? Me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is my total of the reason that I want to do this series is I just think there's so many people I want to meet and talk to on this platform, and just lovely people. And my only regret is that there are too many for me to cover, but I'm doing my best to get to all the lovely people that I had the chance to interact with here. And this is just a way to sit down and get to know them a little more in depth. And you know, it's wonderful.
Really breaks down the walls even more. So
I think so. Yeah. For me anyway, I feel like it's enriching. You know, it's really enriching and wonderful to be able to meet so many different people and talk about and everybody's a little different too with their experiences. So and I love your emphasis on some of the classics, and you're discovering in fantasy, I think, some of the things that you love about the classics too, which to me makes me so happy to hear that, you know.
Yeah, actually, when I was reading The Grace of Kings, I was kind of prepped of, hey, this is not near, like, reads more like a history book or whatever. I've been very, very slowly reading the Iliad over the last year.
Oh, cool.
And it just, the happenstance and the convenience of me reading the Iliad, I see the direct influences on The Grace of Kings. And I'm like, this makes it so cool, like, that I see what he's doing. And if I didn't have that context, I don't think I would have enjoyed it nearly as much. But because I have that context, I'm like, one work is informing the other and vice versa. And it's just really cool.
This is why it's so important for people to read broadly. You know, my experience, for example, of John Gwynn's The Faithful and the Fallen was incredibly enriched by the fact that I knew Paradise Lost, which is a major influence on that series.
Which that was my epic poetry that I read in 2021. I loved it, by the way.
Paradise Lost, yeah. I mean, it when I teach Paradise Lost, it is one of the most discussion generating reads of the semester. By far, I can always rely on Paradise Lost to get people excited to talk about free will, about Satan as an anti-hero, you know, about the gender dynamics going on between Adam and Eve. And, you know, it seems like a very thought-provoking read, even hundreds of years later, you know.
Again, there's a reason these classics have stood the test of time. Yes, there's a asterisk of, people in power wanting to make sure that certain works and certain voices are upheld and maintained. That's a whole nother conversation and totally valid. But we wouldn't be spending our time and efforts to copy manuscripts for thousands of years. If they weren't worth it. So
absolutely, and just for me, I don't know, there's just a kind of a delight in the fact that something as old as Beowulf can inspire an author like Tolkien, and that Lord of the Rings just breathes Beowulf the whole way through. If you understand Beowulf, you understand a lot of what Tolkien was doing in Lord of the Rings. You know, it's just, I love these connections between the older stuff and the newer stuff, and I find it there's a mutual enrichment going on there.
So if I could ask for another recommendation, like what's like an old to middle English work that you think is totally underrated and not because obviously we all know about like Beowulf and Canterbury Tales and Green Knight, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Like what's your favorite like underrated old to middle English work?
So it could be old English or middle English you're looking for.
Just older, I guess, in your wheelhouse.
Would you be considering also perhaps something in Old Norse?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right, that makes it even more interesting. So it's not like it's underrated in the sense that it's not well known enough, but I think if you're at all interested in Norse mythology, then an essential text, the text which gives us the vast majority of our knowledge of, gods like Odin and Thor and all of that gang, it would definitely be the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson, who was an Icelandic chap. And he was writing in the early 13th century and was trying to preserve the memories. So that's more than a couple hundred years after the conversion to Christianity in Iceland. And so the knowledge of the old gods was beginning to fade and that sort of thing. And he wanted to, because the old skaldic poetry was very much rooted in these mythological and legendary stories. So this book was his attempt to preserve that knowledge. So we're very fortunate that he decided to do that, but B, that there was a certain tolerance in Iceland for the old myths that doesn't exist in other parts of Europe. And in England, you don't have, other than, Beowulf, which really has a veneer of Christianity sort of stuck onto it.
Yeah.
They really avoided talking about the old gods, Woden and so forth, right? I mean, you have the preservation of names like in Wednesday, Woden's Day, and in that sort of thing, and in some place names, but they really did sort of smother all that. Whereas they took a different attitude in Iceland. And fortunately, I think because we wouldn't know much at all about the old Germanic gods if it weren't for people like Snorri. So if you're curious at all about that, it is, in parts, it reads like an instruction manual for poets, which is really what it is. But it also has all these old stories. And a lot of modern authors have taken these old stories and done, like Neil Gaiman has a book which is basically a retelling of what Snorri, some of the stories that Snorri told, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, I can highly recommend that. But if you're interested in just like a straight up story, there also are great sagas from Iceland. Some of them are domestic in nature, so they're like novels before novels were actually a thing. I mean, most people who talk about the history of literature would say the novel was an invention of the 18th century or so, right? Mm-hmm. But the Icelandic sagas are the most novel-like thing, at least coming from Europe. And they were much older than the 18th century. So, and some of them are very domestic. They talk about locals who came, and so there's some kernel of history in those as well.
Yeah.
Those are sagas like Njal's saga, or Grettir's saga, or there are various sagas that you could find that are more about the locals. Then there also are these mythological sagas, though, like the Volsung saga. And the Volsungs are some of the most important, the legendary family from the mythical past. And there's the story of, in the Volsung saga, as we have it, it's Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, right? And he's referenced, or his father is referenced in Beowulf. So these were stories that were common to the Germanic peoples, very, very old stories. So yeah, another one that's more along the mythological would be the saga of Hrolf Kraki, who was a Danish king. And so those are wonderful too. And there are other types of sagas, but those are my favorites, really, the more domestic ones and the mythological / legendary ones. Yeah, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, I'm always pushing people in the direction of the sagas. But they're just, to my mind, some of the most brilliant writing, and they are the best stories coming out of Europe through the entire Middle Ages. Mm. I will absolutely die on that hill. There is no other storytelling to me that should resonate as much with a modern audience as the Icelandic sagas. And these stories being told in this remote corner, right, in this almost forgotten place, where they preserved all these old myths, but also were telling their own stories. And there's nothing like it. There's nothing like them anywhere else in Europe. It's just tremendous. I mean, to me, it's one of the wonders of the world that this little island produced such a wealth of literature at a time when most of the, I don't want to sound mean about it, but a lot of what we call literature from Europe during the Middle Ages is very boring. It's very, to a modern person at least, it tends to be very churchy and very formulaic in a way that I find to be less interesting, I guess. Stories of saints and that sort of thing. And, but the Icelandic stuff is just, it's exciting, engaging storytelling. To me, anyway. It's not quite, they're not as character driven and that sort of thing as we come to expect in modern writing, but they're very novel like in other ways.
Nice.
So
yeah. You literally wrote them all down.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, there's a wealth of great sagas to check out. But if you're interested in the mythology, then I would say Snorri's Prose Edda. And if you really get interested in it, then you should take a peek at the Poetic Edda. When these are poems of the sort that Snorri was trying to preserve. And so once you understand the stories, you've got the background, then you can go over to the Poetic Edda and read these ancient poems that reference the gods, and you'll get a lot of what's going on in there because you've already read Snorri's book. You've gotten the instruction manual down, right? So.
Yeah. Have you read anything like the, I'm gonna butcher the name, Mahabharata?
Yes, so read, like, people over there these days don't say that final A, even though it's there. So they say the Mahabharat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Mahabharat, which is, yes, I have read a translation. Of course, I don't read Sanskrit, unfortunately. So I read an English translation, and it's amazing. It's fantastic. Yeah. That and the other big epic, the Ramayana. It's actually shorter, but it's still a big epic. But yeah, the Mahabharata, if you actually read the whole thing, it's much longer than anything like the Iliad or the Odyssey even.
Yeah.
It's just it's a vast story. So I'd recommend reading a kind of translation summary kind of thing. And there are lots of different versions of this story. There's the more famous ancient versions that have been sort of compiled in more recent times, but there's all kinds of retellings and translations. It was made into a very famous TV series over in India as well, that anybody who's from that part of the world can tell you about the television series, the Mahabharata.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's awesome. I highly recommend that as well if you're interested in that epic.
I recently read The Palace of Illusions by Chirta Banerjee Divakaruni.
Divakaruni, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I loved her writing. Her prose is gorgeous, and just the story itself, it got me really, really fascinated.
It's based on the Mahabharata.
Yeah. So I was like, there's a wealth of storytelling that, at least in the Western world, we haven't even considered. Generally, talk about the general populace. So I'll highly recommend it. It's beautiful, and it's so vast. It has kind of everything. It's got everything. It's got action, it's got romance, it's got philosophy. One of the most famous episodes from the Mahabharata is the Bhagavad Gita, which happens in the midst of battle, where one of the main characters, Arjun, he's racked with pain because the conflict is between cousins, and there are people he knows on both sides, and he has to kill people that he knows, and some of them he even loves, some he doesn't love so much because of the rivalry, but he's racked with pain and guilt, and his charioteer, who is his friend Krishna, who is also a god, takes his sort of godlike form in the midst of this episode, and it's just this incredible philosophical treatise about the nature of life and what makes meaning for us in the midst of this life, and what following our callings and that sort of thing. It's beautiful. And you could read that all by itself. A lot of people do, the Bhagavad Gita. It's a fairly short read, but it's just part of this vast epic, right?
And so it's got everything. It's got everything. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, if you're looking for older stuff, then yeah, I tend to like old stuff. So
I mean, like I said, you know, I feel like we get kind of bombarded by, oh, this is new release, new release. I'm probably overcompensating. I'm like, I don't want the new releases. I want the like, let's just go back, way back.
yeah,
So
it's awesome. So what about you? Do you have any recommendations that you would share with me that you think something I might like to look into?
so actually, I think you would really enjoy The Spear Cuts Through Water.
Okay.
It has just a weaving of perspectives, first person, second person, third person, and it's a fantasy epic that takes place over 5 days, but it's also got this like dreamlike quality to it,
Oh, I
where
like that. Yeah.
you as the narrator are literally fall asleep and like go into this, they call it the dream theater, or inverted theater. I apologize. And it's just, what he does in this is incredible. I've read it 3 times now, and it was only released in August. Like, it's
Oh, wow. Huh.
it's genuinely, it blew me away. And I want more people to read this book. So
Interesting. So when you say dream like, is it because of the effect that it has on you and it sort of sticks with you? One of those kinds of reads?
yeah, so it's literally it literally starts with I'll actually read the first line,
Oh, wow.
line or two. So it is, so he actually puts the dedication as, this one's for me. So he sets the expectation that, like, I read the story for me. But it's, before you arrive, you remember your Lola smoking. You remember the smell of her dried tobacco like hay after a storm, the soft crinkle of the rolling paper, the zip of the matchstick, which she'd sometimes strike against the lizard-rough skin of her leg to impress you. You remember the ritual of it. Her mouth was too dry to lick the paper shut, so she had you do it, the twiggy pieces of tobacco sticking to your tongue like bugs' legs as you wetted the edges. She told you it was an exchange, your spit for her stories. Tales of the old country, of ruined kingdoms and tragic betrayals, and old trees that drink the blood of foxes foolish enough to sleep amongst their sharp roots. Any tale that could be told in the span of one quickly burning cigarette.
Wow. That's a start. Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's obviously more than one line, but I couldn't help myself. And but yeah, it's just, I'd already obviously read The Vanished Birds. That was his first novel. And I loved his prose. So I was blown away by The Vanished Birds. So I genuinely did not expect to like the Spirit Cuts Through Water as much as The Vanished Birds, let alone like it blowing my mind. And it's just, it's so good. It's so good.
Wow. Neat. Well, thank you. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I'm sure Joanna would agree with you in advocating for that author. So yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Evie. And thank you also for this really lovely conversation. I've had a really great time. It's great to reconnect with you because I really enjoyed our past discussions a lot. And I'm so glad. And I hope we'll have an opportunity to chat in the future as well. Maybe if you do read some of that Norse stuff or the Mahabharata or anything like that. There are other people, certainly, I'm sure, who would love to talk about those things with you too, but put me on your list if you don't mind.
And then Dune Part 2 is supposed to be coming out this winter.
Yes.
So
yeah, and that's a definite must watch for me. I'm not a big time moviegoer, but that is one movie that when it comes out, I will go see for sure. Because I really liked Part 1. I know it wasn't universally loved, but I'm going to make a prediction, which is that is a film that is going to be appreciated more and more as years go by. I think. I loved it from the beginning, so I would love to see more people come on board with it. And not that it did badly. I think it did actually pretty well.
Yeah.
But there were certainly, I think, plenty of some who were really big time Dune fans who just couldn't stand the what the film did, that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. There was just, justice for Lady Jessica. That's all I'll say. But I will add that yeah, I think what Denis Villeneuve might do or will do with part 2, I think hopefully, crossing my fingers, knocking on wood, it'll actually make part 1 like better.
It'll elevate the first part.
With the context of the whole. So
yeah,
I'm
cool.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk with you about anything, whether it's films, books, whatever. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Cool. It's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk with you. And everybody, once again, I know the numbers aren't the most important thing, but she's pretty close to 1,000, everybody. So, go and check out She Was Only Evie. There will be a link in the description below. And until next time.